when you think about relationships in education, do you think about how kids know their teachers or how teachers know their students or both? Because I think when we talk about relationships, the importance is that we focus on the reciprocation, that we actually know each other, that we make these connections. And what I find is that when you build those connections, when people know, stories about you, they see the connections they have, things get done a lot quicker. And I was really reminded of this when I was talking to Matt Woods. He is a phenomenal educator, doing incredible things, doing so many things, and doing them very well. And the theme that kept coming back over and over and over again is relationships. But what I noticed about Matt was really kind of sharing who he was and sharing his connection and really kind of making sure students knew about him and built those relationships. And we talked about this idea of compound interest, that, the earlier that you actually invest in those relationships, later they start coming back to you. They start helping you later. That when we spend that time, saying hello to people in the hallways, when we build those little connections, that later when, something could go wrong, it saves, hours and hours of time because there's that trust, that's that connection. But it really takes that connection there. And so just amazed by Matt, his story, what he talks about, his book series, I Want to Be, is absolutely amazing. How it came about and what it is absolutely awesome. You're going to love it. And you can see it in the link below. But I really enjoyed talking with Matt. He's someone that I've actually had the privilege to connect with over the last few weeks because I was actually on his podcast as well. I know you're going to love this conversation. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. Hey everyone, it's George Couros, another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. And I am really excited to actually have Matt Woods from Virginia here, very accomplished educator. In to be honest, your short career, you've been a teacher, you've been a vice principal, you're a principal, you are now working in central office. You have a book series out. I don't know where you're getting the time to do all this stuff. I'm a little jealous. You obviously you might as well give a time management course because you're obviously doing some amazing things here in a short amount of time. When I was 32 years old, I wasn't doing anything. I was eating chips. This is basically
I do that. I am a snack junkie. I won't lie about that.
Now that was the one thing I had over you. Now I didn't even lost that. So hey Matt, it is awesome to get to know you. I had the pleasure to be on your podcast, and we'll actually have that link below as well. And so I'm so glad you could take the time to be on mine. So can you just tell people who you are and just what you do today and kind of how you got to that point?
Definitely. Like I said, thanks again for having me on here. My name's Matt Woods. I'm an educator. Like I said, I just love to tell folks I'm just an educator. That's exactly what I am. But to be specific, like you said, I've been a teacher at the high school level. I was a middle and high school assistant principal. I was a middle school principal. And now I'm a director of student support services for the school district that I work in. I'm also an educational consultant. So I work with different amazing leaders and districts all across the country. I have a podcast, like you said, so I'm a host of a podcast, education podcast, Leading Out the Woods. And I've got a children's book series, which I'm really excited about, the I Want to Be series. Shout out Code Breaker. Got my first book deal. Man.
I have to do it. I have to do it.
There
you go.
Yeah. So shout out Brian and Daphne. And we're actually in the process of finalizing the second edition of them, and we're about to re-release them through Codebreaker. So I'm super excited about that. So man, it's me in a nutshell.
Okay, I got to ask you this, and I'm curious because I know a lot of people want to know. Well, just listing all the things that you've done, when I first started teaching. Because how long have you actually been in education?
12 years now.
12 years?
11, 12 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've been in education a short, when I first started teaching, I thought 11 years. That's forever, right? But it goes by quick. And so you've done so much stuff. in a short amount of time of career. How do you do your job, create content, podcast, write books, do consulting? How do you find not the time, but how do you I don't even know if manage is the right word for this. Maybe prioritize. How do you figure that out to be able to do all these things, and be successful doing them?
Yeah. Well, thank God for coffee. Coffee helps a lot as well. I
I'm
love
drinking.
me
I'm
about
drinking.
two
I'm
cups
drinking
every
some right
morning.
now, man. I'm drinking something
There
right
you
now.
go, brother. But no, I think when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. You know, it just feels like an extension of what you're already doing. Um, and I've noticed now, as I've gotten older, the time, like you said, when you're younger, like, oh, I'm just gonna hang out, I'm gonna stay up playing video games, or
Yep.
and or watching my Lakers, because I'm a diehard Lakers fan. A lot of folks
Oh,
know
there we go. Oh no.
Lakers play.
Oh no. We're
Yeah,
gonna have
yeah, I
to get
had to
into
throw it
that.
out
We're
there.
getting into the Lakers now. We're getting into the Lakers soon.
So,
Coming to the podcast.
yeah, but it's then thinking about your time, and then like, okay, I can sit here and watch an hour and a half of that game, or I can watch it for about 20 minutes and then spend that other hour and 10 minutes working on my podcast.
Yeah.
When my son goes to sleep, yeah, I could stay up and watch like a movie on Netflix,
Yeah.
or I can work on a new script for a next book. I mean, it's, like for me, it's when you start thinking about how you're using your time and prioritizing it, and then all of a sudden it doesn't really feel like you're doing so much, because
Yeah.
using the same amount of time, it's just, instead of me doing something else, I'm just now putting my attention on other things.
Yeah, and it's not in like it's you didn't say like while my son is awake. I go to like you're obviously spending time, with your family. And
Exactly.
when I was I actually when you're talking about this, so I do a lot of speaking, traveling, consulting. And I remember I was actually on a plane and I'm like writing a blog post, I'm getting through email. The plane is actually one of my favorite times. And it's because nobody can call me and I can't take any calls. I can just zip through some stuff, right? And there's a woman sitting beside me, and she was just kind of like looking. Like, do you know when you feel like someone just wants to talk to you, but you don't look
Yeah.
because you don't want to talk? Like you just, I don't want to get into it. I don't whatever you want to talk about. I'm not interested right now because
I'm
I
not in the
gotta get
mood.
doing
Yeah.
stuff, right? And so she finally like I kind of like I actually have I have giant like I have small headphones and I have giant headphones, and giant headphones are a symbol. Don't talk to me. It's like my like hey don't like I'm doing stuff right now, right? Because it's I don't know, it just makes it feel bigger. I don't know, whatever. So she comes over, so she finally gets my attention. I'm like, oh hey, how are you? She's like, you know I was like you once, where I was just working, and that will catch up to you, right? And I was like, hey, I appreciate that. I'm doing this stuff now, so when I get home I can just be with my kids, so I don't have to worry about this then, right? So like I could watch movies right now because there's like basically all of them, right? And yeah, I have access to them, but it is prioritizing that so I could, and it's like trying to find those times where you have that, and it is hard, but it is trying to think about that. But like I could have easily watched those movies and then kind of like half with my kids, and like I'm not. I wish I could say like I am 100% totally when I'm around my kids. I never check my phone. I'd be lying, right? But I'm way better than what I used to be because I find those times when that maybe I don't even have access to my kids in that moment to do this, right? And I really appreciate that because it is finding it like when you have that purpose, it's like you watching like a Netflix show versus doing that. I find doing that work sometimes is just as enjoyable. Like, would you like agree? Like, you feel that?
My wife is, I know she's listening to this, she's going to hate me for saying it, but that's kind of what I say all the time. Like,
Yeah,
I find enjoyment
yeah,
in what I do.
yeah,
Like, I get inspired by talking to other amazing educators like yourself. I get inspired by doing the work. I get it. Like I tell people, I get a thrill just looking through data sometimes and thinking about like, oh, how
Now
could we have
now
done
you're
this
pushing it. Now
different?
you're pushing it.
I mean, seriously, like
Yeah.
that's just me. And you know, and I make sure to tell folks, I understand that is the last thing a lot of folks would
Right.
want to do. But
Right.
I'm that person. And like I said, like you said, like that lady saying to you on the plane.
Mhm.
I sometimes a pet peeve of mine, I'll get mad when folks will say, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing all this,
Right.
or you're just and I'm like, hey, I'm happy. I think you
Right.
should try to find what makes you happy too, because I'm not messing with you. I'm over here,
Right.
doing my work or whatever. So yeah, man. Like I said, I love it.
It's I'm gonna drop some truth right now. The reason some people say that is because they're not doing that, and it makes them feel bad. That's what it is. It's not, oh, you shouldn't be doing that because I'm just the happiest person ever. It's like, no, I'm gonna kind of drag you down a little bit. It is
Yeah,
that. And
it's the crab mentality.
yeah, and so like you see that sometimes, and that for me, like, I love. I'm notoriously bad for this. I do things I love, and then if I start to lose that love, then I move on to something else that I love, and I find that, and like
Yeah.
I love writing. I'm not a big reader. I'm not, but I love writing, and so I find I create a lot of stuff. I love doing this podcast. I love meeting new people, and having this like what a great opportunity to sit down and talk to you. And like, I don't feel like, oh, this is such a waste of time. This is like, no, this is good for me. I
Yeah,
love that people watch this, but I would do this if nobody did. Do you know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
that's something I love having this time. I want to ask you this question. You said that you went from teacher to high school assistant principal, correct? To middle school principal,
It was middle school assistant principal.
middle school assistant principal to middle school
Then I was a
principal.
high school assistant principal.
Okay. So tell about the transition from like high school to middle school. Like how was
Gotcha.
that? Yeah.
So, and y'all, I promise for everybody listening, I'm not crazy. I love the transition
Yeah.
from high school to middle school. And but I tell folks this, and this is what I think it's important when you talk about knowing your strengths, knowing, you
Mhm.
know, what you feel you're good at and what like you're kind of cautious about. And I used to tell my teachers, I feel like I was a better middle school administrator
Mhm.
than what I would have been if I was a middle school teacher.
Right.
Because, and what I mean by that is I knew I wanted to teach high school. And then, now I teach a little, I should have said earlier, I also do be adjunct professor on the side too. So I teach some college level. So,
That's crazy.
so I love teaching the older students. But when it comes down to the management of like a building and knowing the structure and how the things, like, I guess, kind of should be set up to
Yeah.
run a school, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I preferred the middle school because to me, everything felt slower.
Yeah.
And I use like a sports analogy for a lot of my pre-service teachers. I said, think of elementary, middle, and high school, like your rec sports, your school sports,
Mhm.
that college/professional. You're
Right.
still playing the same game, but
Yeah.
now everybody's just bigger, stronger, faster, and everything's moving a little
Right.
quicker.
Right.
So I remember for me, when I got my first administrative role and it was a middle school assistant principal, I just felt almost like everything was moving slower to me, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Like the
Yeah.
transitions
Yeah.
were slower. The type of things that I saw felt a little smaller compared to what I was used seeing at a high
Mm.
school level, with 14, 15, 16-year olds, etc. So yeah, man. And I remember I had that own self-reflection where I had to really kind of think like, this is strange. I knew I never wanted to be a middle school teacher because
Right.
I didn't think I had the
Right.
patience. But then I found myself loving middle
Yeah.
school. So when I end up, my wife and I had transitioned at the time because I was going to the University of Georgia for grad school. So
Yeah.
we had left, and it's like a graduate assistant, doing that thing. But then I was like, hey, I want to get back into school. So that I became a high school assistant principal.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was like, man, I really miss middle school. Like, I just want to get back in that middle school vibe. So when I had the opportunity to then become a middle school principal, oh man, you would have thought I was like just the happiest joker in the world, because I was looking forward to being back in that environment because I had missed it so much.
Well, I actually, when I started high school, even though I wanted to be an elementary teacher, I started at the high school level. And then I went to elementary, and I said, I will never work with middle school students. Never, ever. And then, I ended up teaching at a middle school. And then I was an administrator at a K-9 school, and I love them. It was like, you kind of have, I think part of it was, I remember how I was in middle school, and that's not a person I want to deal with in my life. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of I was like, yeah, I don't want to deal with 13-year-old Georges. That would be the worst thing ever. Okay, I thought of this story, and I'm gonna ask your advice and see if I'm like the worst middle school principal. Okay, so I worked at a K-9 school, and there was a kid in grade 9, and he caused some trouble, and we had some conversations, right? So so there was one day he was so it's a kindergarten grade 9 school. He was going at, and he was like kind of not like doing anything physical, but he was kind of like mocking some kindergarten kids, right? The kindergarten kids teamed up and basically started like throwing rocks at him and like beat him up to the point where he couldn't see. And I'm like, and he came in so the kindergarten kids teamed together to beat up a grade 9 kid. Now, he wasn't like a horrible beating or anything like this. So he's like crying in my office, but he's also like, doesn't want to say what happened because he doesn't want to say yeah, I got it from some 5-year-olds. And so I'm like sitting here and I'm like, what? I don't even know what to do here. Like these kids are kind of like, they're probably scared, and they like teamed together. It's actually pretty smart for 5-year-olds. And, doing this. And I remember like the one kid, when I talked to them, I'm like, hey, what happened? And the kid was like terrified. And he was like, I'm like, I can't understand this kindergarten kid. I can't understand anything he's saying. So I actually I just said, I think this is just natural consequences. So I'm just like, let's don't do this with kindergarten kids. And so I actually didn't I was just like, I think the discipline was you getting beat up by kindergarten kids. And I don't think you'll ever bother them again. Cause every kid. So I don't know. This is maybe probably making me look horrible. So I'm asking you, cause I was like, as soon as I heard the story, I'm like, no, I started laughing. I'm like, that seriously, like kindergarten kids like mob together, and you kind of like see this like circle of little kids running together. So what would you have done in that situation?
See, that's I could say that's an experience that I've never had, because
I know.
And the reason why I say that was, when you talk about a school like that, having those kind of interactions,
right.
I'm used to K through 5, 6 through 8, or maybe a 4 through 8 school, and then a 9 through 12. So all the kids are generally within several years of each other. But no, for something like that, I think having them together, but then really kind of going by like their developmental age, like to kind of see like for the 5-year-olds, so they're already, like you said, they're they can barely breathe, they're crying. So you having a conversation with them maybe doesn't have to be as stern, because you can already see the impact that it's causing them.
Oh, they were terrified. They had the thought of them coming to the office, and it was like, I think, preface all of this so nobody, you can't, I don't teach anymore, so you can't fire me. So to preface this, the thing, and you and I have talked about this, the importance of relationships. This wasn't I think sometimes when I was in admin, people expected me to have a handbook that listed everything a kid could possibly do wrong, and then the corresponding punishment. Right. So if kid does A, what is A punishment? I'm like, okay, I have a relationship with this kid. This kid has been in the office before. He kind of got that he deserved it. Do you know what I mean? Like that, he crossed the line. these kids did this. These kids, if I like, what am I going to suspend kindergarten kids for sticking up for, like, there's like all these things. And like, I called all the parents and we had conversations about it. I remember actually calling the boy's mom, the grade 9, and she's like, good. Like, it's good that happened. Maybe he won't bug kindergarten kids anymore. Right. And it was just kind of like, it was like that. Right. And I think that
But
to me was a really important aspect of like when you're dealing with student discipline, right? It's not just like this kid did this, here's the result. It's like I know people are like, oh, I don't, suspensions are bad. No, suspensions are sometimes good. And sometimes in school suspensions are good. Sometimes out of school suspensions are good. It depends on the relationship. It depends on the kid. It depends on what you know. Like I knew sometimes if you suspended a kid, and I'm saying this is truth, if that kid was home, it would be like, oh, is this kid like, what could happen to this child? Like at
yeah,
home, right? And there's no way I'm like getting that, like that kid's gonna be in my office for 5 days before I'm sending them, to that situation, right? And I've seen that. I've seen that. And I don't know what your thoughts are on all that.
no, I mean you're right. It's the relationship piece, and it's because generally when you open that dialogue up with a parent or guardian,
Mhm.
and I really mean this now, especially myself being a parent now, and
Yep.
you can just say like, hey, look, we just need to have this conversation. You know, your child can't be doing this, and
Yep.
and a lot of parents, like when I talk to them, I'm really kind of very open. Like, I'm like, hey, you know, your kid can't be doing this.
Right.
Like, if
Right. Right.
somebody did this to your kid, how would you feel? Like, help me kind of come to a resolution. Now, that was obviously what I was as a building administrator. My role now, usually I get the call after the call. So
Right.
someone has already called and then they're mad and they're like, I want you to lay this person out because they told me this and I think this is
Right.
wrong. And generally from there, and what I found now is it's all still the same thing. Like when you have that conversation,
Mhm.
and a lot of times just getting people to really kind of see where you're coming from, but also seeing where they're coming from,
Yep.
and
Totally.
and and getting them just to see like, hey, look, we might disagree, like a
Mhm.
parent could have disagreed with you. They might have said, no, you should have suspended that kid.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I could have, but this is why I felt this was
Yep.
the right way. But once again, you were engaging people in a very authentic conversation and being very real with them.
Yep.
So it still alleviates that pressure that I like to say. That pressure comes from when you're not having that clear communication.
Yeah, and that social capital that, I built in communities when I was administrator, I'm sure I know you would do the exact same thing. Every morning I'm outside greeting families, talking to kids, talking to,
Mhm.
parent in the hallway sees me and says, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" I would never say, "Hey, you need to book an appointment." I was just like, "Hey, yeah, no problem. Come on in." If I'm free. And then when something goes wrong, then it was way easier to deal with, right? But if that was the first time I ever interact with that parent, they don't know anything about me. They don't know if I care about their kid. They don't like that. That's then that 5-minute conversation could, it could turn into hours and then calls to the superintendent and all that other stuff, right?
Can I chime in on that for a second?
Please, please.
Because when you said that, it brought me to something, and something that really kind of hit home for me as an administrator.
Yep.
So I think I made the comment earlier. My first administrative job was at a middle school,
Hmm.
and it was actually in a different district. So the district that I had started in teaching, I actually went to a different district
Yep.
to become middle school assistant principal. And you know, I was 25. I think I had just
Yep.
turned 25,
Right.
24, 20. So I was super young, really young as an
Yep.
administrator, right? So get to middle school, obviously start making those relationships, right? So I was there maybe 2 years. Yeah, I was there 2 years. Then I went back to grad school at UGA. So we were gone for several years, and then I moved back. And I ended up moving back in the district where I had started my administrative career at the time, right?
Right.
And I happened to then get a job at the high school up the street from the middle school where I used to be an assistant principal.
Right. Right.
And those same little kids were now, half of them were like grown kids because some of them were looking me in the eye. And I'm about
Yeah.
6'3", 6'4", everybody. So some of those kids hit a huge growth spurt in those couple of years I was gone. But what was crazy was how those relationships then carried over
Right.
when I got back. Those same, oh, Mr. Wood, like they were, oh, you haven't changed. I mean, you look a little older. Your hairline, it start. What did one mom just say? Mr. Woods is starting to fade a little bit, honey. I'm like, yeah, age is catching up to me. The stress that these kids giving me, but all joking aside, I remember it was such a surreal feeling because thinking about how some nuggets that you put years ago
Right.
and laying the foundation is playing dividends several years later. Because like I said, they hadn't seen me
Totally.
for what, 2, maybe 3 years. And Rock come in the door. Oh, Mr. Woods, hey, what's up? Oh, Mr. Woods, up. We know how you feel about this. My bad. I mean, it just felt good just to kind of validate the impact of building those relationships.
It's like if you know anything about stocks, ETFs, things like that, the earlier you invest, the more it pays off the longer. It's like compound interest. Like when you said that, basically those years going on over and over and over again, that compound interest, accumulates very, very quickly. I do want to ask you about, and you told me a little bit about this, and I'd love you to share the story again. You have a series out, and it's a children's book series, correct? With Codebreaker.
Yeah.
Brian Aspinall,
Mhm.
also Canadian, right? I should add the O Canada theme. Just so you know, I don't know if you know. I don't know if you know Justin Bieber is Canadian. Do you know? I got this little aside for the
Yeah.
Canadian people. So there's a place in Canada called Tim Hortons, and it's like Dunkin's Donuts for Canada. And they have
Okay.
these like donut holes, but they're called Timbits. But now they have like Tim Biebs, and so they're like Justin Bieber. I'm telling you, they're going crazy. I'm telling you, Tim Biebs.
Fun
I
fact.
haven't had them
Yeah.
yet,
When I
but
come to Canada, I'm gonna have to go scoop some up.
it's like, yeah, I don't know how. I don't even know why I brought that up. But anyways, it's literally the only thing on social media the last 5 days. It's like these Timbit whatever donut holes from Justin Bieber. So
There you go.
I'm a little bit of a Bieber fan, but whatever. Anyway, so your children's series, I want to be. So tell us. I don't want you to just tell us tell us what the books are, but like I loved how you told how they actually came to fruition in the first place.
Okay. So yeah, so the series, how it started was the main character is my son, Hilton. And what happened is, my wife and I, we had our son, and he's biracial. And I think for a lot of us who are parents,
Mhm.
the world starts really changing when you're a parent, and you start paying attention to things with a little bit more detail. And for me and my wife, what happened was we really started paying attention to the books that we put in front of them, the posters, the images, everything. And one thing that really kind of brought up some concern for me or some heartburn was I found it having to be a job to find
Right.
things that I felt related to our family. Like, why did I have to put so much effort to look through books to find things that I feel like relate to him? Like that it shouldn't be like that, right?
Mhm.
So what happened was my wife surprised me for one of my birthdays and bought me, I guess, one of those books where it's supposed to be like you and your child personalized. And I remember looking at the book and saying, well, man, that dude looks really good. He looks like a model. He don't look like me. Like, I don't see myself in this book. That was, I would tell y'all, that was my initial first reaction. And, from there, I mean, I liked it, and I said, hey, thank you. And she was like, oh, you don't like it? And I was like, no, I'm not saying that. And so obviously, y'all, for all my married folks on there, you know how that goes. So we kind of had a little conversation. And from there, it turned into, she was like, well, if you think you can do better, you should just write your own book. And I was like, well, sure, I'm going to do it right now. She was like, good. So I storm off to the kitchen. And literally from there, man, that's the idea really kind of took fruition. Then it kind of was like, hey, I think I kind of got something. So like I said, the theme is I want to be. And how each book starts is it's me sitting in my son's room. So that first page that you see in the little recliner in there and the blanket in the window and everything, that's actually my son's room that I
Mhm.
have me and the illustrator sketched out. And it starts off every night him sitting on my lap saying, like every night I imagine what I want to be. And it takes him through a different occupation. So you see his little kid face on like
Oh,
a
that's
grown
awesome.
body.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it just blew up. It went from, the first one about I want to be a lawyer to a meteorologist, to an architect, meteorologist, CEO, etc. And we've got 6 right now in the series. And initially I had self-published them, did everything myself. And then, like I said, shout out Brian and Daphne. They're amazing at Codebreaker. We had kind of struck up a conversation and they looked at it and they were like, hey, we love this. We think other folks will like it, Matt. We want to help you kind of get this message out there. And yeah, man, we connected and we're actually in the process now. We did a couple small tweaks to it because now everything's going to rhyme really tight. It's going to be really good. And yeah, the second edition is getting ready to come out, man. And we're looking forward to it.
Love it. And I think that, when you think about like the school experience, thinking about, I didn't connect with a lot of the stuff that was we read in school, connected. And I think that matters tremendously, right? And I always use this example of The Great Gatsby. Like most people read The Great Gatsby in high school if you're anywhere near my age. And I always ask why. Like, why did we read The Great Gatsby, right? And actually, I always say, did we read it because it's in the curriculum? We must read The Great Gatsby, or the school already own 100 copies and the teacher just knew the book, right? And that was the connection. And so you're not necessarily seeing this. And like if you actually look at elementary or leveled reading, there is this pushback that kids will read at higher levels if they actually are interested in the content, see themselves represented in the space. And so they will read at higher levels, right? But if they don't have any connection to the characters or anything in the book, it actually stagnates their reading, right? And so that's actually, I love that I love that you did that. But I especially love that your wife challenged you and you're like, all right. I'll do it myself. I like it. I like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, man, it's exciting. Like I said, it's been an amazing experience. How folks have really gravitated to the book, books gravitated to the meaning of it. And yeah, I mean, folks are just chomping at the bits for the re-release. So yeah.
Well, hey, so hopefully do you know because this will be published in 2022. When is the re-release projected for? Do you know?
Oh yeah, 2022. Yeah, supposed to be hopefully the end of this month, but if not, through in January.
Okay, so based on that, if you look in the description down below, you will actually see a link to Matt's books. So I would pick it up and check it out for your own family, and it's obviously for your school too, right? Like some kid, like we can read to our school, right?
Teachers,
check it out. Yeah. So that's awesome. All right, so I wrote this down because nobody, once I start talking about this, everyone turns out. You mentioned the Lakers. Why are you a Lakers fan? I got to ask this. What's the Lakers deal?
So the Lakers, first
because nobody listens. This is all educators listen to this. Once I get in the basketball, everyone's gone.
Yeah. So like first and foremost, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. Definitely the Jordan, in my opinion, of my generation,
right?
The impact that he had on me. And no, but I've been a Kobe Lakers fan, God, like since the late 90s, so I was there right before. Right. I'm talking about like with
Nick Van Exel.
Yes, there you go. I was gonna start dropping some of them nuggets, and I didn't think. And when Vladdy used to play for us,
I'm Magic Cream days, man. I've been with.
There you go. Yeah. So I just always had affinity for the Lakers. So that three-peat, with Kobe and Shaq. I tell now I feel like the old person saying like, oh man, the good old days. And then even when we kind of went through the rebuild and Kobe pulled out the next couple of Gasol and I just love the Lakers. And then we got the King now. We got LeBron. I mean, how could you not love the Lakers?
Okay,
you just got to ask yourself that.
So that's what I want to ask you is to find out who's your guys. Because like I actually been a Lakers fan since Magic and Kareem. So basically growing up in Canada, it's all hockey. And the only games we get were the finals. So you either like the Lakers or you like the Celtics, right? Because that was like my generation, right? And I hated Larry Bird. I love him now, right? When you get older, you start to appreciate how good these players were. But I gotta tell you this Kobe story. You're gonna love this. You're gonna so appreciate this because it just shows you kind of how different a time that we're in. I actually diehard Lakers fan and have been forever. So I grew up in a small town in Canada called Humboldt, Saskatchewan, and there's a university an hour away, and we'd always play basketball. And there's this guy, his name was Willie Murdaugh, and Willie Murdaugh was the best basketball player I've ever played against. He was ridiculous. He was like, he kind of looked like if you took a pin to him, his muscles would pop because he just was so ripped. I've never seen someone so ripped in my life. He would come play with us like I would play with grade 2 kids when I play basketball. Like it was just like we were like, I'm 6'4" as well, right? So I'm not like a little guy. So he was so good, and he played on like a semi-pro team. He got a tryout with the Lakers, right? And I was like, this is ridiculous, right? And I'm like, well, he's Willie Murdaugh. I was going to make it. This guy's incredible. So he got cut. I'm like, if he got cut, I can't imagine how good NBA players are, right? Like he was so good. So this is the part you're going to love. And so he comes back. He's wearing this Laker practice gear. And that was the year Shaq went to the Lakers. And I said, Willie, how is Shaq? He's like, Shaq's really good. But there's this kid named Kobe Bryant. I'm like, who? He's like, Kobe Bryant. I'm like, no, I don't care. Tell me what Shaq. He's like, I'm telling you, Kobe Bryant is going to be ridiculous. I'm like, whatever. And that's the first time I ever heard of Kobe Bryant, was a guy I knew in Canada who played basketball with him. And like, like I watched Zion Williamson play since he was 14 years old. But like Kobe Bryant at the time, unless you lived in Philly, you probably never heard of him, right? Like a totally different time with social media and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So then I just became like, I was like a diehard Kobe fan. You can't see him, but I got like, you actually see one pair. I got some Kobe shoes behind me, right? So I got like, I'm a Laker. I'm like a lifelong Laker guy. Yeah, I was Cedric Sabalas.
The George and Matt show. We could talk about the Lakers too, man. See?
Yeah. Hey, so right. And so, hey, you'll appreciate this. I was so mad they traded Vlade Divac for Kobe Bryant. I'm like, why would you trade for a high school kid, Vlade Divac? I'm like, I'm kind of looking at myself in this video. I'm like, I kind of look like Vlade Divac, right? Right, a little bit. I got the beard. I got
just a little bit. I
got a little Vladdy in me. So I remember I was like, how could you trade Vlade Divac for this Kobe kid, right? So yeah, just crazy how that progresses. So I don't want to get into basketball too much because it's just me and you now. Nobody else is listening because every time if someone mentions basketball, I'm like, okay, I gotta ask you a question. But Matt, dude, is like seriously just so impressed. I really hope. You can actually see Matt has his Twitter handle up there, Wood from a Woods. Connect with him on Twitter. I know it's a little bit different on Instagram, so we'll post that as well. But you can actually check out Matt's series as well. And I hope we get to do this again because it's been a real pleasure to get to know you over the last couple of weeks and connect with you. So, it's just been awesome, man.
Definitely, man. I appreciate you inviting me on. Appreciate the space. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the great work you're doing. So glad we were able to connect.
Well, I'm just an old slow guy now. I don't do anything. I'm like, I'm gonna go on TikTok after this and just eat chips. You like teach a class and write a book at the same time. So, anyways, man, super inspiring. I wish all the best for you, and I can't wait for this to be published. So, everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.